Hi everyone, my name is Abhuraj Garikapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Abhai. Previously, as Jin Wu saved Hae-In's life by transforming Byong-gu into a shadow soldier, as the Korean hunters departed, Jin Wu stayed behind to clear the remaining ants. Afterward, he reached level 100 and resurrected the Ant King as a shadow soldier, naming him Baru. New characters were introduced, including a Chinese 5-star hunter and 2 potential future enemies, while Jin Wu's father observed them from the shadows. After the Jeju Island raid, Jin Wu honored those who had lost their lives. He then secured permission to open his own guild before stepping into another red gate alone. Inside the red gate, Jin Wu's shadow soldiers fought against the gate's monsters. He managed to find the boss, and the creature asked him if he was the one who had been killing his people. It remarks with twisted amusement how impressed it is that Jin Wu managed to make it this far, despite having such a small, seemingly fragile body, but that amusement quickly turns to menace. The creature raises its hand and signals to its forces. He had already stationed his minions throughout the area, ready to spring a deadly ambush. But something's wrong. Nothing happens. The creature glances around in confusion. The air stays silent. No allies appear from the shadows. No attack is launched. Just an unsettling quiet. A frown begins to form on the creature's face. Meanwhile, Jin Wu remains still, calm, his gaze fixed firmly on his opponent. Not a trace of panic shows on his face. Then Jin Wu finally speaks. "Call me small again. That's funny." He raises his hand and gives a subtle signal. Suddenly from the dark edges of the forest, movement stirs. One by one figures emerge, shadow soldiers, loyal and fierce, marching out with unwavering purpose. Some drag behind them the severed heads of the enemies fallen. The forest grows darker as the ground begins to fill with Jin Wu's summoned army. Jin Wu, standing tall among his shadows, taunts once more. "Looks like no one from your side made it out." Confusion turns into dread. Then, thud, something hits the creature square in the face. Startled, it reaches up and grabs the object. It's another corpse, one of its own. Eyes wide, the creature lifts its head and sees Jin Wu again, this time surrounded by a vast army. A sea of darkness prepared to devour anything in its path. Panic fully takes over. The creature shouts in desperation, ordering any remaining forces to attack and destroy Jin Wu's army. But Jin Wu remains composed. He calmly gives his order, "Wipe them out." Both sides surge forward and the battlefield erupts. But from the very first clash, it's clear. The outcome is already decided. Jin Wu's shadow soldiers are faster, stronger, and better organized. They strike with deadly precision, overwhelming the enemy with little resistance. As the intense battle unfolds, Song Jin Wu begins advancing toward the dungeon's boss. Leading the way ahead of him is Tank, the enormous shadow bear who crashes through enemy lines with ease, clearing a path for his master. Sensing the threat, the boss monster erupts with rage. It roars and charges directly at Jin Wu, attempting to stop him before he can get closer. But before it can land a single blow, 2 powerful shadows intervene. Bear swoops in with incredible speed, slicing off one of the boss's arms with razor-sharp claws. Igris follows right behind, his sword flashing through the air as he severs one of the creature's legs. The massive beast collapses to the ground, overwhelmed. As it tries to lift its head, another presence looms over it. Tusk, the high mage of Jin Wu's army. Without hesitation, Tusk casts inverse gravity, pinning the boss down with an unseen force. The ground buckles beneath the weight, rendering the monster completely immobile. Step by step, Jin Wu approaches. Calm, he comes face to face with the fallen creature. His voice is low and cold. "You'll answer my questions," Jin Wu says. "It'll hurt less if you cooperate." He proceeds to interrogate the boss, trying to extract vital information. But once it's over, Jin Wu stands before its lifeless corpse, silently reflecting. Again, nothing useful. He suspects the same interference as before. The system itself may be blocking the flow of information. Frustrated but not surprised, Jin Wu opens his inventory. "I'll figure it out eventually," he mutters. "So it's fine." From within the inventory, he retrieves a peculiar object, a key. It's one he'd obtained earlier from a cursed random box. Jin Wu recalls an important moment. He had reached level 100 during the Jeju Island raid. That achievement fulfilled the minimum requirement to unlock a special dungeon. Now the item's name becomes visible. Key to the Temple of Carthian. A countdown timer ticks beside the key's description, indicating the limited window of time before the key would expire, and the dungeon would be lost. As he studies the item, Vivid memories flood his mind, flashbacks of the double dungeon, the place where everything began. He realizes something. This may not be random. The system is calling him back, but he's not the same man who once crawled out of that dungeon barely alive. Now he's stronger, far stronger, stronger than anything that temple might hold. He wonders if all of this was orchestrated from the beginning. If that dungeon is still waiting for him, and if it is, then wait for me. Meanwhile, deep inside the temple of Carthian, a shadowy figure stirs, sitting in the darkness, an entity smirks, sensing Jin Wu's resolve from afar. It hears his words and prepares. Jin Wu is coming. The scene shifts to a dark and eerie dungeon. A man trembles in fear. Trapped, in desperation the man stammers, demanding to know who or what this creature is. But the figure responds coldly as if talking to himself. He's not the one either. A pause lingers in the air, then the figure mutters again. They're hiding well, those brilliant fragments of light. This cryptic remark refers to powerful beings, ancient rulers known as the brilliant light fragments, scattered and concealed in human hosts. It's s3x01, known as the king of the snowfolk, the monarch of frost. Sensing a familiar aura, s3x01 turns. Standing in the shadows is Yagman, the king of demonic specters, also known as the monarch of transfiguration. With a calm and confident tone, Yagman announces that he has news regarding the eastern island. s3x01 narrows his eyes, asking if he means the small landmass that lies eastward, the one humans call Korea. That island is the current dwelling of the Shadow Monarch. Intrigued, s3x01 asks if Yagman intends to take action there. Yagman explains that the rulers have begun deploying their legions near that region, just south of the Shadow Monarch's territory. He then adds with a hint of ambition that he will be the one to claim that place. But s3x01 challenges him, pointing out the obvious risk. And how do you plan to deal with the Shadow Monarch himself? Yagman, unfazed, gives a slight smile in response. If the planner fulfills the contract, everything will go according to plan. Then with growing interest he adds, besides the greatest of the brilliant light fragments has been confirmed to be there. This revelation changes everything. s3x01's expression sharpens with excitement. He turns toward Yagman, realizing the implications. You came all the way here just to tell me that. Yagman nods slightly, then inquires what s3x01 plans to do with that information. s3x01 responds with a smirk. If you're willing to follow me, then why not? But before their conversation can continue, s3x01 pauses. His eyes scan the surroundings. Something feels off. We've been lured here. A third figure approaches. s3x01 watches carefully and comments that the man they saw earlier couldn't have possibly held the power of a brilliant fragment. Yet somehow the traces of that power are here. This can only mean one thing. Someone intentionally baited them. And now that someone is standing right in front of them, with burning rage in his eyes, the man confronts them. He demands to know more about the small island to the east. He suspects they're referring to his homeland, Korea. s3x01 smirks at the man's fury and responds with mockery. And what will you do about it? From behind, Yagman speaks up, clearly uninterested in wasting time. We don't have time to deal with him. They begin to turn away, but s3x01 can't resist throwing one last taunt. Try and stop us if you can. The man explodes into motion. Furious, he charges toward them with raw power, vowing not to let them escape. But s3x01 remains still. In an instant, an ice shield forms in front of him, effortlessly blocking the incoming attack. He grins, unfazed, as if amused by the attempt. With a calm but menacing aura, the Monarch of Frost raises his hand. A pulse of power erupts. A devastating wave of frost energy explodes outward, shaking the dungeon to its core. The scene transitions from the chaos of the battlefield to a quiet parking lot. Jin Wu walks toward his car. Just as he reaches for the door handle, a voice calls out behind him. "Excuse me," he says politely. "Are you Jin Wu?" Jin Wu turns slightly, not unconsciously. The man introduces himself as Adam White, a senior official from the Federal Bureau of Hunters, a powerful U.S. organization. He hands Jin Wu a business card and adds with a smile, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Sung. Please feel free to call me Adam." Adam quickly apologizes for the unexpected approach. He admits that Jin Wu was hard to track down and even mentions that he dropped by Jin Wu's office earlier. Hearing this, Jin Wu remembers something. This must be the man Jin Wu had mentioned, the one asking around for him. Jin Wu narrows his eyes and asks directly, "What business do you have with me?" Adam remains calm and respectful. He explains that he's here to share important information that piques Jin Wu's interest. What kind of information, he asks. Adam gives a subtle smile then answers, information that no country or institution in the world could provide, except for us. Jin Wu raises an eyebrow. And why would you share that kind of information with me? Adam responds without hesitation. Because people like you are worth sharing it with. It's mutually beneficial. He continues, revealing that their original purpose for contacting Jin Wu was something entirely different. But after witnessing what Jin Wu did during the Jeju Island raid, their deputy director insisted on meeting him in person. This level of attention is unprecedented, Adam admits, but the deputy director will explain the details himself. He gestures toward a car parked nearby. If you'd like, we can take you to him now. Jin Wu glances at the vehicle, his expression thoughtful. He still isn't fully convinced whether the information is trustworthy. As he opens the door to his own car, he replies, "Let me think it over. I'll contact you." Adam chuckles softly as if expecting that answer. "How silly of me," he says. "I forgot one rule. Never hide a strong hand when trying to strike a deal." He pauses, then says two words that immediately grab Jin Wu's attention. "An upgrade." Jin Wu freezes. Adam explains further. An upgrade, he says, is an awakened individual with the ability to enhance the power of another awakened being. You've heard of them, haven't you? As he speaks, the scene shifts. Adam and Jin Wu are now in a car, pulling up to a building where a bigger conversation and deeper truths are about to be revealed. Inside, Adam White leads Sung Jin Wu into a quiet meeting room. Adam introduces him as Michael Connor, the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Michael stands and shakes Jin Wu's hand firmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you," he says. With formalities out of the way, Adam takes his seat and mentions that he will serve as their interpreter during the meeting. Wasting no time, Michael slides a stack of documents across the table toward Jin Wu. The folder contains immigration paperwork. Michael explains that under normal circumstances, acquiring American citizenship would take 1 to 2 years of processing. But for Jin Wu, all it takes is a word. Michael says confidently, "We're prepared to make you a citizen immediately." Jin Wu, however, stays focused. He calmly replies, "I came here because Mr. White said you had information to share." In questions, "Is it truly possible to upgrade a hunter's abilities?" Michael smiles knowingly and gives a surprising response. "In fact, the one who can do that is here right now." He turns to one of his staff and says, "Please call Miss Selner in." Moments later, a woman enters the room with quiet grace and calm confidence. Michael stands and introduces her. "This is Norma Selner," he says, "the only person in the world who can enhance and awaken beings' abilities." Jin Wu observes her closely. She feels different, not just in appearance, but in the unique aura she carries. "She doesn't feel like any hunter I've met before," he thinks. Michael then encourages Miss Selner to explain her ability in her own words. She steps forward and begins addressing Jin Wu directly. "I understand if you're skeptical. Everyone I've met had the same look when they first heard this." She pauses, then adds with a faint smile, "But once they experienced it, they beg for more." As she walks towards Jin Wu, Michael gently calls out to her, keeping the moment grounded. Miss Selner begins to explain. She tells Jin Wu that every awakened individual has a natural limit, a ceiling they cannot surpass. A hunter's rank is fixed, and unless they undergo a second awakening, their power will never grow beyond that limit. This fact is widely accepted as common knowledge throughout the awakened world. But then Jin Wu asks, "So you can change that without hesitation?" Miss Selner nods. "Yes, I have the ability to lift that limit." She goes on to describe a process that happens in 3 stages, a gradual unlocking of a person's true potential. She admits that she didn't know what to call this ability at first, but over time, it became known as a force reawakening. Put simply, she can draw out the true strength hidden within an awakened being. Mr. Connor nodded in agreement with Miss Selner, affirming that everything she had explained was indeed true. However, he was quick to add an important limitation. Each time Miss Selner used her ability, it drained her immensely. Because of this, she could only help around 3 to 4 people in a single year. Jin Wu remained quiet, but his thoughts were racing. If what they said was true, then he might be one of the few chosen to benefit from such a rare and powerful ability. That alone spoke volumes about its value. Curious, he leaned forward slightly and asked how effective this enhancement process truly was. Miss Selner responded calmly, explaining that the results varied from person to person. However, for those who completed all 3 stages, the increase in physical capability ranged from 20% to 30%. That number hit Jin Wu like a thunderbolt. To someone already at the peak of their abilities, A 30% boost was almost unthinkable. He finally understood why someone like Hwang Dong-soo had accepted the US offer, even if it meant public backlash. It all made sense now. Who in their right mind would turn down such a chance? Still, a thought crossed his mind. What would happen if others discovered the truth about Miss Selner's power? Mr. Connor answered that concern without hesitation. That was precisely why the US government kept her under close protection. In exchange for her cooperation, she received full security and a generous salary. In return, she assisted in strengthening select hunters, those deemed valuable enough to receive her gift. With that, Mr. Connor formally reintroduced Miss Selner to Jin Wu, stating that her powers would be used on him as a token of goodwill. Jin Wu, still unsure of their motives, questioned whether this was truly a gift or just bait to draw him in. Connor clarified his position. If Jin Wu agreed to work with the Federal Bureau of Hunters, he would receive top-tier benefits. They would also personally arrange introductions to any guild he preferred, and assist him in negotiating the most favorable contract. Miss Selner then gently pushed a small plate across the table toward Jin Wu. She assured him there was no need to rush his decision. They simply wanted him to take time and consider the offer. Jin Wu looked at her with a hint of surprise. She reaffirmed that, as they had said, this was a gift, not a demand. After a brief pause, Mr. Connor made another proposal. He asked if Jin Wu would allow them to temporarily remove his limits so that he could experience the effects firsthand. Jin Wu was taken aback. For nothing in return, he asked. Connor responded that it was to be considered a complimentary demonstration, meant only to show him the potential of what was being offered. At that moment, Jin Wu remembered something Miss Selner had said earlier, that once he felt the power, he would come back on his own, begging for more. Her confidence now made perfect sense. Miss Selner then requested that Jin Wu hold out his hand and look directly into her eyes. She explained this was the first step in the process. Watching from the side, Michael Connor observed quietly. From his perspective, Jin Wu had already taken the bait. He was calm, calculating, and listening. But Connor believed that once Jin Wu experienced even the first stage, he would come back to them voluntarily. And if he was the impulsive type, he might even sign the papers right then and there. As the process began, Jin Wu extended his hand toward Miss Selner. The moment she took hold of it, a faint glow started radiating from his skin. A green aura gradually enveloped him, and a flicker of light ignited deep within his eyes. Mr. Connor silently observed, his mind drifting to Jin Wu's past achievements. He recalled how Jin Wu had turned the tide during the catastrophic Jeju Island raid, displaying powers that defied explanation. Even now he couldn't help but wonder, what more is this man capable of? The energy continued to surge. Miss Selner's eyes began to shimmer, and her entire body was cloaked in a radiant yet eerie light. Then something shifted. It was as if her consciousness had been pulled elsewhere. Suddenly, everything around her faded into a vast void of darkness. Within that black expanse, a vague outline began to emerge. A shadowed figure stepped forward slowly from the depths. Each step it took brought it closer to her. And then it stood directly in front of her. Its presence was overwhelming. Its glowing, fearsome eyes pierced through her soul. It wasn't just looking at her. It was watching her, as if silently warning her that she had trespassed where she shouldn't. Overcome with fear, Miss Selner let out a scream. The glowing energy shattered. The process came to an abrupt halt. The atmosphere in the room instantly turned hostile. Agents nearby sprang into action, drawing their weapons and aiming them directly at Jin Wu. Panic and confusion filled the air as they demanded to know what he had done to Miss Selner. But before they could escalate any further, Mr. Connor exploded in rage. Slamming his hand on the table, he yelled at the agents, calling them fools. "Do you even realize who you're pointing your guns at?" he barked. "If you're so concerned, go check on Miss Selner. Don't stand there acting like amateurs." Turning toward Jin Wu, Mr. Connor lowered his head and apologized. His voice was firm but regretful. The agents had overstepped. Jin Wu, still composed despite the sudden hostility, accepted the apology with a calm. "It's all right," but the tension wasn't gone yet. Fuming, Mr. Connor walked over to the nearest agent and leaned in, his tone colder than ever. "If this were Thomas Andre or Liu Jigging sitting in that chair," he said, "you'd all be dead right now." The terrified agent could only nod in silence. Connor then turned his attention back to Miss Selner, who was now visibly shaken. Her body trembled and sweat clung to her skin as if she just escaped a nightmare. Concerned, he asked if she was feeling unwell. Seeing her condition, Mr. Connor quickly addressed Jin Wu again, explaining that it would be best to postpone the procedure. Jin Wu, understanding the situation, agreed without hesitation. With a subtle gesture, Mr. Connor instructed Adam White to escort Jin Wu out of the room. Once the door closed behind them, the room fell silent, except for the sound of Miss Selner's ragged breathing. Mr. Connor approached her carefully, his tone softer now. He asked her what had just happened. Miss Selner, still unable to calm herself, finally spoke. Her voice trembled. "He's a king," she whispered, "a powerful one." Connor blinked, startled by the term. "Do you mean, like a national-level hunter?" he asked, still trying to make sense of her words. But Miss Selner shook her head. Her expression turned pale. "No, not like that," she said. "I've never seen anything like this before." She repeated the words again, slower this time. "He's a king, but not just any king." She paused, trying to gather herself. "When I looked into him, he looked back at me. Within him, there was nothing but darkness, a depth I couldn't escape from." Her hands were still trembling as she added, "There's no limit to his power." Inside the newly established guild office, Jin-Ho sat at his desk, focused on paperwork. As he wrapped up a few reports, he muttered under his breath with a scoff, "Some people just never learn. Filing complaints after getting sued, whining like kids, that's not how this works." After some time, Jin-Ho leaned back and nodded in satisfaction. He believed he had successfully tracked down all the groups that had been spreading false rumors about Jin Wu. While taking a short break, he suddenly noticed Jin Wu standing silently behind him. Startled, Jin-Ho turned around. Jin Wu commented with a smirk, "You're working pretty hard." Jin-Ho could only think to himself, how does he always appear without making a sound? Jin Wu asked if everything was running smoothly. Jin-Ho reassured him that there were no issues. Then, noticing Jin Wu's outfit, he asked why he was dressed like that. Without answering directly, Jin Wu handed him a bag filled with magical cores. "You said we needed funds for the guild," Jin Wu explained, opening the bag. Jin-Ho's eyes widened. The contents were more than enough. "Well, I guess we won't need to worry about paying employees' salaries anymore," he joked. Jin Wu tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Jin-Ho reminded him that hiring another guild member meant they'd need to cover that person's salary too. Jin Wu nodded in agreement. "Even if we're only filling the guild's required numbers, we need someone who's loyal, someone who's in it for the long run, not just a placeholder." Then, with a more serious tone, Jin-Ho brought up an important topic. "There's something we need to take care of first," he said. "We need a name for the guild." Jin Wu sighed dramatically. "I thought it was something serious," but Jin-Ho countered. "It is serious." Jin-Ho leaned in, throwing out suggestions. "How about Sung Yu Guild based on your surname? Or Yu Sung, it flows better. Or even Woohoo Guild using the last syllables of our names. Wait, maybe Jinjin Guild based on our middle characters?" Listening to all the creative, if slightly ridiculous suggestions, Jin Wu finally declared his decision. "We'll name it Solo Play Guild," he said. Jin-Ho blinked. Was that supposed to be a joke? Before he could respond, a knock came at the door. Jin-Ho got up and opened it. On the other side, and stood a familiar figure, Hunter Cha Hae-In. Surprised, he asked, "What are you doing here?" Cha responded directly, "I want to join your guild." Soon after they sat around the table together, Jin Wu looked at her with curiosity and asked her to clarify why she was there. Cha repeated calmly, "As I said, I'd like to join your guild." Jin Wu was puzzled. "What's happening?" He asked if the chairman had requested her to join, or perhaps if Hunter Choi Jonin had expelled her from the Hunter Guild. Cha firmly denied both. Looking at her more seriously, Jin Wu asked, "Then why would you want to join a guild like mine, especially with that name?" Cha raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you really named it Solo Play Guild?" Jin Wu nodded. "Yeah, what's the problem? The vice master and I agreed on it." Jin-Ho quickly objected. "Hey, when did I agree to that? What about the names I suggested?" Shifting his gaze to Cha, Jin-Ho subtly examined her breathing and expression. She seemed calm, but he could tell it was an act. "She's hiding something." "But why?" Then he asked bluntly, "You were awakened 2 years ago. You're still under contract with the Hunter Guild, aren't you?" Cha nodded but added, "I have enough to pay the cancellation penalty." That response caught Jin Wu off guard. "She's even willing to pay the penalty," he replied honestly. "Our guild doesn't have the resource to match what an S rank like you usually receives." Cha countered effortlessly, "That's fine. I don't need an upfront payment. Jin Wu frowned slightly, but there's nothing here for you to gain. So why would you want to join us? Cha paused, unsure how to explain the thoughts racing through her mind. If I tell him the truth, it'll sound insane. Her mind flashed back to the Jeju Island raid. She remembered regaining consciousness in a helicopter. The chairman had told her they had just landed at the association and that the hunters would soon be transferred to the hospital. She immediately asked about Jin Wu. Was he the one who saved them? The answer was yes. She had nearly died, and in the future, something like that could happen again. Next time, I might not survive. Back in the present, she struggled to find the right words. Her cheeks reddened. I want to stand by your side all the way to the end. Jin Wu noticed her silence, and the color rising in her face. Why can't she answer? What is she hiding? He asked again. So you're not going to answer me? Cha finally responded. I just want to live a peaceful life. Is that so wrong? Jin Wu paused. She's only 22. Carrying the pressure of being an S rank at her age must be overwhelming. After everything that happened on Jeju Island, her choice makes sense. After a moment, he said, there's an entrance test for our guild. Surprised, Cha replied. That wasn't in the recruitment notice. Jin Wu shrugged. Probably a new policy from the vice master. He turned to Jinho. Can you get us some drinks and snacks? Jinho left the room. Once they were alone, Cha asked, so what kind of test is it? Jin Wu answered plainly. You'll have to defeat one of my summons. Cha raised an eyebrow. Am I really that weak in your eyes? What kind of summon? Jin Wu smiled slightly. For you, Hunter Cha. I'll use my strongest one. Cha stood up. When's the test? Right now, Jin Wu said. Let's go to the association, Jim. He thought to himself. This is the perfect time to test whether shadow exchange works with two people. He turned to her and said, you don't need to walk. We'll take a shortcut. He stepped closer. We just need to stick close together for a second. Darkness enveloped them as Jin Wu activated shadow exchange. They vanished. A moment later, Jinho returned to the office, carrying snacks. But when he walked in, he didn't see Jin Wu or Cha. Instead, standing in the room was a towering high orc. The two stared at each other in complete silence. Then without a word, that orc reached out, took the food tray from Jinho's hands and devoured it in one massive bite. Jinho could only blink in disbelief. The scene shifts to the quiet gymnasium of the Hunter Association. Hae-In looked around, surprised. She had just arrived through Jin Wu's teleportation ability. Turning to him, she asked in amazement, how did you do that? Jin Wu, keeping calm, thought to himself, I was right. Shadow exchange acts like a portal. I can bring someone along. He didn't explain much. Instead, he simply said, let's begin. But Cha paused. She realized she had forgotten her usual weapon. I left it behind, she said. Jin Wu raised an eyebrow. You mean that pickaxe? Cha frowned slightly. That's not my weapon. Jin Wu chuckled. I was just kidding. Looking around, Cha mentioned there might be a spare weapon. In the storage area, she moved toward the nearby door and opened it, revealing a stockpile of reserve gear. Not top quality, she thought, but decent enough for practice. She eventually emerged holding a standard sword and told Jin Wu she was ready. Jin Wu glanced at the blade in her hand. Will you be alright? That's not your usual weapon, Cha responded with resolve. Weapons don't matter. Monsters never fight us on our terms anyway. Jin Wu nodded slowly. She's right. Now came the question, who would be the right summon? An ordinary shadow soldier wouldn't stand a chance against someone like Cha. After a brief thought, Jin Wu summoned a powerful knight draped in black armor. Among my forces, he's the best with a sword, Jin Wu thought. The knight stepped forward. His name was Igris. Clad in heavy black armor and radiating silent intensity, Igris stood ready. Cha asked a logical question. What are the wind conditions? Jin Wu explained, you win by defeating the summon. You lose if you surrender. Even as he spoke, he reflected on his earlier words. I said I'd use my strongest summon, but Peru would overwhelm her. This knight will do just fine for now. With both sides prepared, Jin Wu raised his hand to begin the test. But just as Cha started channeling mana, Jin Wu stopped them. Wait a moment, he said, motioning for her to turn around. From his inventory, he pulled out a gleaming blade. The Demon King's long sword. He handed it to Igris. Use this, he ordered. Once the weapon was in place, Jin Wu gave the signal again. Begin. The battle started instantly. Igris moved first, channeling the power of the enchanted sword. A streak of crackling electricity surged forward aiming for Cha, but she was already on the move. With a swift motion, she dodged the electric arc with grace and speed. As expected, Jin Wu thought, she's fast. That sword would have cut down anyone else. With a single swipe, what followed was an intense exchange of blows. Igris pressed forward with practiced precision while Cha countered with sharp instincts and skill. The sound of steel echoed through the facility. Meanwhile, in his office nearby, Chairman Go Gun-hee was reviewing some documents. When the noise caught his attention, he paused. No one should be in the gym today, he thought. He reached for his phone and called an assistant. Connect the gymnasium's security feed to my monitor. As the footage came into view, his eyes widened. It was Jin Wu and Hunter Cha. He watched silently for a moment, then a knowing smile crept across his face. I see, so that's what this is. He remembered Cha's expression from long ago, when he had told her that Jin Wu was the one who saved everyone on Jeju Island. That look now made perfect sense. He turned back to the call. Turn off all surveillance cameras in the gym. Log the inspection today as a routine check. Then he leaned back into his chair. The rumbling from below caused the building to briefly tremble. The chairman felt the vibration and chuckled to himself. They're enjoying their youth, he said, with a soft smile. Back in the gym, the fight had reached its conclusion. To Jin Wu's surprise, Igris was kneeling, defeated. Cha stood tall, breathing heavily, but victorious. She turned to Jin Wu and asked, was that Black Knight your strongest summon? Her eyes narrowed slightly. You said you'd summon your best. Then please bring him out. Jin Wu's expression turned serious. I can't promise your safety, he warned, but Cha replied with confidence. I want to fight him again. A shadow crept across the floor as Jin Wu reached into his vast arsenal of darkness. Behind him, a towering figure began to take shape, a monstrous presence with insect-like limbs and a regal stance. The former Ant King, now a loyal shadow soldier, Brew had arrived. His dark aura pulsed like a living storm. Jin Wu asked once again, are you sure you're going to be alright? That's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Up High. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.